Hi, everyone. Welcome to Agribusiness Global Live. My name is Renee Targus. I'm the editor for Agribusiness Global.
And I'm Lauren Milligan. I'm the content specialist for Agribusiness Global.
Today, we're co-hosting a webinar, Fine Tune Your Regulatory Strategies for 2026. I'd like to put on your radar a few events that are happening this year and next year. So the first event we're having is on October 29th. We're having the Agribusiness Global Asia Virtual Seminar. It's a 3-hour seminar, and we'll be covering India and Southeast Asia with experts we've got an executive level perspective, regulations, market analysis, and then also an update on China. And also next year we have the in-person trade summit, and that will be in Las Vegas. We just want to get that on your radar so that it's one of the events that you come to attend in 2026. All right, so that's it. Now let's meet our panelists. We've got Dr. Piyatida Pukclai. She goes by Tung, and she's the Regional Sales and Regulatory Policy Manager covering Asia Pacific for Knoll. Today, she will be talking about Southeast Asia. George Fountas, the Global Director in Regulatory Affairs for AgriThority. He'll be covering the United States and EU. And then we've got Alexandre Quesada. He's the founder and CEO of SmartTox. He'll be covering Latin American countries. And then we've got Garth Drury, principal consultant for Staphyt. He is covering East and South Africa. So welcome all panelists. And Tung, we're going to start with you. What regulatory changes are you seeing that are affecting crop protection and biological markets in Southeast Asia?
Okay. Well, for crop protection and biological, what I can see quite clear trend in Southeast Asia is regulators are focusing more on safety, sustainability, and standardization. Giving some example, for ASEAN level, you can see that different countries currently they have their own regulations for registration, but efforts are being made recently, especially for this year, that associations, industries, together with the ASEAN Working Group, start to discuss about streamlining the biopesticide project in order to have the clearer guidelines for product registration and testing for this region. So they have concern. Of course, they are aware of the regulatory hurdles until now. So that's why now they start to discuss about this point. Another point is about having the concept of the phasing out of the highly hazardous pesticide. Not only in Vietnam, but many countries, they start to ban those highly hazardous pesticides and looking for those alternatives or the low-risk pesticide. This is also an opportunity for biopesticide, which can be replaced or being used together with the IPM approach. That is the trend for this region. So safety, sustainability, and standardization are the key trends nowadays. Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds like that's kind of going worldwide, but I'm glad to hear that. All right, George, question, I'm going to put it to you, and if you could answer for the US and EU.
Perfect, thank you. The trends tend to be circling around similar things, right? So there's lots of new, at least acceleration of new regulations on PFAS and forever chemicals. You see a lot of the Endangered Species Act in the US for EPA. Those strategies were finalized, but now you're starting to see them implemented. Lots of new resources are coming out as far as being able to plan ahead on endangered species mitigations that you can anticipate in various other types of bulletins that are out there. Another key component here is EPA reorganization. So there was a reduction in force. They're moving things around to different areas. So it's just a watch out, right? That there could be potential delays and maybe being able to contact the right people. There's quite a few new bills on the floor as well that I wanted to bring up. I won't get into all the details, but Plant Biostimulant Act is being discussed and modified. There's a National Biotechnology Initiative Act, all these things. They're not finalized yet, but they're being discussed and they're being actively pushed by some of the industry groups, specifically BPIA. Agricultural Labeling Uniformity Act and Pesticide Injury Accountability Act. So all these are things to watch out for in the future. Maybe we'll talk about those in the coming years. For the EU, some of the things that are ongoing, there's quite a few regulations being reviewed right now. Uniform principles, PPP data requirements, those are all open to public comment right now. Those are all being updated. Another one, a really important one, is the FPR. It was implemented quite a few years ago, but now one of the huge criticisms was the lack of microbials that you were allowed to use under the FPR and to go forward with that regulation. So that specific component of the FPR is currently being reviewed, and they're trying to find a path forward. I know they're working with, I believe it's AIT, to try and develop some guidelines and testing that you might need to do to get a new microbe added to that regulation, which is something most of the market wants.
Great. Yeah, those are big developments. And I know especially in the EU, a lot of people have their eyes on that. All right, so we're going to go to Latin America now with Alexandre. Alexandre, do you have any updates or trends that are going on in your region that are important?
Yes, we do. We have many actually, because here in Latin America is happening a lot of things. But I will focus today here in Mexico, Brazil, Costa Rica, and Argentina. So talking about Mexico, everybody is seeing the news about what US is doing with all over the world about the tariffs. So that is not different with Mexico. So they are renegotiating some deals, some agreements they had before, which one of them is NAFTA. NAFTA was an agreement they have, or free sales agreement they have between Mexico, Canada, and US, and that is being updated nowadays. So that is something that Mexico needs to take care about, and who's the companies which wants to make business in US. So also these tariffs will have a compensatory tariffs from 20 to 70% in September, like in this month, for the countries without trade agreements, such China and India. So you need to take care about it, because the prices of these tariffs will increase depending this product. So that will come from 20 to 70%, and that starts in September 2025. Also, we have the fight for the phase out of glyphosate, which is being discussed for a long time already, and they didn't come with a conclusion of that, because they say they don't have a replacement. Even the government says that there is a possibility to replacement, right? So a part of it, we have 35 products that is in the list of phasing out. I have a list here afterwards, if you want, I can share. Moving forward for Brazil, we have, everybody knows that Brazil has a express corridor, as being called back here in Brazil, for registering biologicals. So that is a transformation on regulatory point of view that is happening here in Brazil, which becomes more sustainable and innovative and more safe for the agriculture basis. Of course, that will not cover the chemical pesticides today, but they will corroborate and is increasing very much. Right, so we have another regulation which is coming up, which is the INC 32. It's not the INC 32, which is from the regulation that needs to be updated right now, and is in the agenda of the phytochemical products to be updated. In parallel of it, we have the guidelines for worker risk assessment, and the establishment of maximum residual limits, which is including in the agenda of new regulations, which is coming up, which will bring a different perspective of regulatory point of view. Another thing is the toxicology evaluation of all the active ingredients, like epoxconazole and thiophanate methyl, which demonstrates constant review under the current specific perspectives of Brazil. Moving forward for Argentina, we have the resolution, the new resolution, which is 458, which was published in June, and that will be in place now in September. Of course, everybody knows that the manual of how to proceed with this legislation is not in place yet, but this new regulation revokes the previous ones, which is 350 and the 694, right? So there is a new regulation in Argentina, so everybody here needs to be aware about it, because SENASA has the line of evaluation of products, and that might interfere in some point during their evaluation because of that transition of legislation. So also we have to highlight the inclusion of the mandatory adoption of G8S and the use of in silico models as a QSAR evaluation for toxicological risk assessment. And the last, Costa Rica, we have international reference. So the registration format for technical grade active ingredients using ecotoxicology and toxicology data can be accepted by the data from FAO, EPA, and EFSA. So the point here, which is being discussed, is the non-relevant impurities above 1 gram per kilogram to demonstrate non-toxicity, which requires knowledge and average of the lethal dose information that most generic producers doesn't have that information. So yeah, there is some other changes here, but I think I ran out of time, so I believe that's it.
Yeah, that was thorough and I appreciate it. Yeah, lots of different things happening in those countries. And Garth, I wanted to hear from you as, for South and East, Africa, are you seeing sort of similar things happening in that region as far as, what changes are you seeing?
Yes, I mean, just to remind everybody that Africa as a continent is about 18% of the world's population, about 20% of the surface area. In terms of the pesticide market, it's around about 5%, so it's relatively small, but it is focused in particularly in countries that have a strong export market. It's where food is produced and exported to adjacent countries. For example, Morocco, just taking North Africa, strongly linked to the EU market. So it's actually an entry point for North Africa for companies coming in from Europe, for example, because we can use a lot of the label into Morocco. They use a French label, for example, that we can adopt. Most of the trends, the changes for regulatory strategies for next year, I'd suggest are driven by the externalities of their export markets of the countries. And I'll just pick one or two. So Morocco, I've just mentioned, obviously there's a shift away from the OPs and carbamates, older chemistry. There's a green Moroccan plan moving towards biological products where they can be used. It's not always the case. Then I move to West Africa very quickly. They have an economic community that they have established harmonization of regulations, but of course the actual regulation is still done at the country level, and so that still needs to be addressed for any incoming applicants. Needs to look at the localities, the specificities for their products primarily. In terms of East Africa, turning to Kenya, obviously one of the lead countries in terms of the let's say the development of its regulatory framework. So often Kenya is a kind of like a bridge into East Africa. If you establish product registration in Kenya, you get access to neighboring countries in within the East African community. There is a form of informal mutual recognition in some of these regions, but never formalized, but it's obviously can be used. A core dossier approach can be adopted with local trials, official trials needing to be done out of Nairobi with the Ministry of Agriculture. They're a key influencer country, and I'll maybe go into that should anybody want to go into more detail. Southern Africa, clearly we have South Africa as a powerhouse there. They have a regulatory framework called the One Health concept, where they're bringing health, human health, environment, and agriculture into one regulatory environment. It makes a lot of sense. And there's mention of the highly hazardous pesticides withdrawal, that they are actually looking at moving those out where they can. The other feature of Africa as a total is you've got the public health for vector control. That's quite an important market, very important from a public health perspective. And that is driven by organizations like WHO, the Gates Foundation, in terms of keeping older chemistry, often pyrethroid chemistry, in the past DDT, for indoor residual sprays. Those are extremely important for them, for Africa from a public health perspective. Also, just to finish, on the FAO, we have to keep an eye on the FAO, which is the Food and Ag Organization, the equivalent of WHO for Food and Ag. And what was mentioned before was these new methods like in silico methods that can facilitate registration. So they have what they call an FAO regulatory toolbox. So regulators who do not have enormous resources can go to the FAO and apply these resources, and that can facilitate product registration. So companies and applicants can do a lot by understanding those tools and presenting their dossiers with those tools engaged. The final thing is that local contact is clearly needed. We maybe go into it in the discussion, but proximity and understanding of local agronomic conditions is very important, as is cultural aspects of Africa. So I think I'll wrap that up from
very good. Thank you.
From a starting point.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So, with all the changes that are happening, and you're talking about public health, and we hear banning products all over, I think it would help our audience to hear a little bit about from your region, what products are being banned. These are causing challenges for growers because they've got a shrinking toolbox. But what are the product gaps where the people watching this, the formulators, the manufacturers, where can they come in to bring new products? What's needed? And Tom, let's start with you as far as what are you seeing that's needed? Where are the gaps in Southeast Asia?
Start with those flawless and alternative pesticides, as we just discussed today, that not only for Asia, but different regions, they're also talking about banning of those highly hazardous pesticides, like chlorpyrifos, for example. Many countries in Southeast Asia, of course, they start to ban or already ban those hazardous pesticides, but the phasing out is quite fast, or even much faster compared to finding or replacing with the alternative. Even alternatives are already exist. However, to register those alternatives in Southeast Asia is not that easy. For example, if you want to register new active substance in Southeast Asia, you still have to submit different kind of document to authorities until they allow you to apply for the registration. So you need to start with the pre-registration and then start to have the registration itself, conduct local trials, and also waiting for the approval from authority. So for new active substance, it can take already 5 years. If we're talking about biologicals, in different Southeast Asia countries, right now they have kind of some countries they have the fast track approval, but in practical, it's not that fast. We know that the authorities they have the same regulatory process, maybe just require less dossier information that you have to submit, and still unclear for many points, especially when conduct local efficacy trials. The guideline designed for conventional pesticide, but your product is biological. It's quite difficult to meet with the expectation from authority. That is the gap, the big gap. As I said, they want to have the alternative to replace those highly hazardous, but the registration process is quite slow. And the second one is about the regional level. We're talking about develop of the guideline, like streamlining guidelines for biopesticide registration, of course. But until we go to that level, it's not that easy. So the gap is for early movers to design product and data pack to fit with those ASEAN-wide protocol. What I would like to encourage industry when they want to register or want to move to this Southeast Asia market is not only aligned with the local partners or companies or regulations, but they need to work in the regional level as well to keep eyes on regarding the upcoming change, understand of the trend in different Southeast Asia countries, and then discuss on how they can bring the product to the market. Yeah.
Is there any sort of thing happening like with agriculture, like, you get different, like we were talking about, like we've got like Agent Rust for soybeans, in certain areas. Is there any sort of problem happening in Southeast Asia that the growers are really struggling with addressing because they've had a product banned or they need an alternative?
Different problems. The banning of product also one of the issue because to find the alternative, meaning that they have to wait for the alternative, and then the cost of those products are not that cheap. Even using the biological in the IPM program, sometimes the knowledge of farmers are not at that level. We need support from authority as well in order to provide information to farmers on how to use those products for their farming, or how can they use that. So cost is very important, right, for Southeast Asia farmers. So the product or using the product is very important as well. Sometimes you have a good product, but they don't know how to use it or they can't afford. That's why we also need support from government. And I think many countries now, they already discuss about the policy to support farmers on using of the biopesticides or the IPM approach together with finding alternative to help farmers. And besides that, I think it should be the time for those downstream innovation by moving beyond discover of the product to practical solution, combining by using smarter formulations, hybrid or biological approach together with the IPM program. We need to mix together. You cannot just rely on one thing. It's not possible for Southeast Asia. Yep.
Right, definitely. All right, George, I'm gonna put this over to you. This question, with the products being banned and challenges arising, what are the product gaps?
Yeah. So in the US, there's kind of multiple layers, right? So EPA can go in and I wouldn't say they ban many, but there's de facto bans by removing food tolerances and things like this. So there's multiple mechanisms they can do to restrict products going to market if there's particular hazards that they're concerned about. And the gaps that follow from that are kind of a direct correlation. That compounded with the difficulty of finding and bringing new modes of action to market, and then having to compete with resistance management. I think all these things together are making it pretty difficult, and there's definitely gaps. Specifically, I think in the biologicals market, we're always looking for bioherbicides for that very reason, because you're typically going to see a novel mode of action. You're typically going to see a good health profile to get through regulatory hurdles. So that's probably a big one. Another kind of component here is all the accelerating PFAS regulations that are coming in are having a direct impact on the products being made available. So while EPA hasn't really implemented anything formal, they have started validating test methods, which is going to make it able to be implemented. And then that next step down, once you go to the state level, you're starting to see states specifically banning. So it makes it kind of infinitely more complicated to try and have to track the state regulation and EPA regulation. And in this case, the state regulation is going to take precedence. So even if EPA allows it, if one of the states ban it, then it's banned. And an example of that is in Minnesota. They just released a new rule essentially it's going to be a phase. So they're going to require disclosure of PFAS in your products by next year. And then essentially the goal is to ban any products that have it in there unless you can argue that it's unavoidable. So that is going to create a gap. So any PFAS linked or perfluorinated compound type pesticide is going to have higher hurdles down the road. So that's gonna be something to look at. In the EU, honestly, it's not terribly different. In fact, Denmark just banned 23 PFAS-linked pesticides, and they have 10 more under review. So it's almost the same dynamic where you've got an EU approval, you go to the member state, and the member states have their own kind of stricter rules that they're going through. So I would say watch out for PFAS, maybe take some preemptive steps to start looking at your supply chain and start now trying to remove those things, and then that'll make it easier down the road.
Okay, great. Thank you. Alexandre. Oh, I think you're on mute still. Sorry.
Oh, sorry for that. As Mrs. Pukclai said, is happening all over the world, the highly hazard products being evaluated to being phased out of the market. I believe that's happening all over the world, mainly here in Latin America countries. So they are being evaluated in all the countries. So talking about Mexico, the most evident alternatives to glyphosate, whose ban, though postponed many times, creates an urgent need to effective, safe, and economically viable solution. And many companies are focused on lactofen or biological as a replacement for that. So the list that we have for the management in Mexico are, like, as I said, 35 products. So we come from Captofol, Dinozed, so Dinosulfoton. So that's all old products, So I believe they are making the revaluation of those products in order to put new products, less toxic products in the market. So all these things, what is happening in Mexico for the tariffs and the ban management is creating an environment to look after new products and new markets. So that's as a bad thing, which comes a good thing, So that creates a new environment for the registration point of view and scenario in all Latin American countries. Mm-hmm. So Brazil, the biggest challenge in the regulatory landscape for pesticides today is the excessive bureaucracy and the lack of predictability regarding the approval of the new products. And new products, I mean not only the new molecules, but new formulations, the mixtures, which comes sometimes to be better than the ones available in the market. So based on the time that we have to put the product in market, sometimes we lose the opportunity to have better products in the market. So the effort of bioinputs itself indicates a historical gap in the adoption of evaluation of these technologies on large scales, so which the new regulation seeks to fill. So we need to fill these bioinputs in order to be better used in the field. And as has been said before, the government needs to create some structure to include these new alternative products like biologicals or new mixtures of chemicals, like better, not highly hazard products in the market. So we need to replace them. So the government needs to create this environment to put those products available for the farmers. Talking about Argentina, we have the alignment of GHS, which will have to be adapted by the companies which are placed there, because those are needs to have a new labeling and requiring many products adaptation of that. And talking about Costa Rica, we have the OECD registered products with identical profile. So the rigidity of the requirements for identical profile for the OECD equivalence pathway prevents the registration of many safe and effective products from countries like some in Europe, which might have minor formulations variations. So that's it. It's something that needs to be cared about, because gaps will happen during this new product which is coming up in the new regulation. So we need to be aware. And as Mrs. Pukclai said, you need to have someone which will support you, because in LATAM, in all those countries, you have different legislations, different approaches, and you need someone which understands all of it in order to guide you to succeed with the best product and with the products that you are not succeed because they are old or they are under evaluation. So you need to have a good accessory to move forward and make business in those countries.
All right, thank you so much, Alexander. All right, Garth.
Yes, so obviously a lot has already been said. I won't repeat in terms of the move away from older chemistry, but I would say for Africa that one of the areas of concern is that local, let's say domestic reasoning, risk benefit calculations are being considered, say within Europe, that are not appropriate for Africa. So you've both got on the benefit side, Africa needing products to cover crops which are not grown in Europe, bananas, tea, other tropical crops on the benefit side, and on the so you've got a sort of domestic sort of consideration of those compounds, which then have an impact on Africa when they close the MRLs, the import tolerances down for those active ingredients. So you've got things like the fall armyworm, which is an invasive pest, come into Africa in 2016, I think, somewhere around there, which is very important, but it can be only controlled by older chemistry, OPs and carbamates. And if they're being restricted, it's very difficult for those countries to continue protecting those crops. You've got transboundary pests like desert locust, for example. Europe is not familiar with that kind of concern. Vector-borne diseases, again, you've got chemistry there where you hear people speaking in Europe about, oh, aren't we good moving out of older chemistry? But you've actually you've got life protecting older chemistry protecting against vector-borne diseases. So this is something that has to be continually preached back to the sort of into the politicians, into the authorities in Europe, to remind them of the impact of this kind of restriction. You've also got a lack of biopesticide and biological control alternatives in Africa from a number of different reasons. Some of them are related to high cost, the fact that they're actually quite segmented. It's quite a segmented market. There's quite a number of different products, and they may not be appropriate for different conditions that you have in Africa, which could have been dealt with by broad spectrum chemistry. And then the third element is what I mentioned at the beginning, is the challenge of compliance for export crops, both at the MRL level and also retailer contracts. So you have large scale retailers like Carrefour or Walmart sort of implement and say, we do not want any residue, or we want half the MRL or whatever. And that has an impact up the chain to the producers in Africa who are unable to protect their crops properly without the application of these products. So for anybody coming in terms of thinking about fine-tuning their regulatory strategy in relation to this question, I think there's a broad area for biologicals, but again, it will need a very localized approach to the key export markets. I mentioned Morocco, South Africa, Nigeria, Kenya, for example. This could be a gap. And other areas is in where we have seen newer chemistry, but that will only be available for the very larger type company who has that newer chemistry in their armory.
Okay, great.
Okay.
I mean, from what I'm hearing from everyone is that, there's these opportunities are for biologicals, to work with chemistry. So like that integrated sort of, but like Alexander said, you see the demise of like certain chemicals, but that's an opportunity for biologicals. So thank you for that, Garth. All right. So for my last question for all panelists, we're looking for your, in your opinion, 3 good regulation strategies to bring products to market in your region. We're kind of getting a little low on time, so give me your 3 top strategies quickly. Tung, you're up.
Okay. Well, the first thing is to align your portfolio with local regulations and plan ahead, because understanding what's allowed to be registered or how rules are changing in the upcoming trend will save cost and time. I saw that we have a question already from the audience about registration of biopesticide. This is a good example because different countries in Southeast Asia, as mentioned before, they have specific rules regarding registration of biopesticide. But if you don't understand about those guidelines, it will be difficult. In Thailand, there are some rules regarding tox data exemption for specific type of biopesticide. You can check with that, and then you can see what need to be submitted and what could be waived, similar to other ASEAN countries. So you need to understand with the local regulations, of course. And the second strategy is about to work closely with local partner and cooperative, because in Southeast Asia, as you know, or some of you might have some experience already, that regulatory officer prefer to speak local language, or even some guidelines only available in local language. So you do need the on-ground support. It's very important to find a reliable partner to support you for the product registration or even do the marketing. And the third strategy I would suggest is to leverage the regional initiative. As mentioned before, if you can prepare your product in order to meet with the regional streamlining program, that would be really helpful, save costs, and also earn trust from users, from farmers, or even importers. That is the 3 things I can suggest. Yeah.
That sounds great. Yeah, thank you. All right, George, you're up. Top 3. Yeah.
Top 3. My number 1, and this is going to be for both regions, is get regulatory involved in your product development as early as possible. When you go to make a particular claim, if you've run trials already, it might lock you into a specific pathway that maybe you don't want to go into. So bringing regulatory in early can help craft the exact data that you need to generate in order to get down the pathway that you want to go. So as early as possible. One other would be bringing in a group. Most times, if you're going to target one geography, you find a local regulatory or product development group to help support you. And then you want to go to another region. It's probably beneficial up front to find somebody. If you already know you're going to be planning market expansion, find a group that can support both right from the beginning and help you build kind of a global strategy up front, so you don't end up duplicating data generation. A lot of times, if you bring them in early and with a wide enough scope, they can help you save time and money in the long run. And the last one, I think, is just keep your thumb on these new PFAS regulations, I think they're going to probably have wider implications in the future than we can even see right now. I think they're going to have impacts on packaging and just total global supply chain. So anything you can do now to start taking that into account would probably be beneficial in the long run.
Okay, thank you, George. All right, Alexander.
Yeah, I believe I'm going to repeat some of what the two panelists have said before, but the acceptance of the data that you are inputting in Latin American countries is primordial. It's something that you need to take care of, because here back in SmartTox for the Latin America countries, we take all your dossier and make the evaluation of all the acceptance, what you have in your dossier, to make the comparison between them, in order to you to don't lose time and money. So the first thing is to check all the legislation, get to know the legislation for each country, and before you move forward with that, get the knowledge to move forward. That's the first thing. The second thing would be having evaluation of which data needs to be applied, which is related with the first one. But for example, some countries, you can apply in silico testing in order to avoid some others, which is happening in other countries, as our friend Garth has said. So the in silico is a new tool that needs to be applied for evaluate toxicity, and maybe in some countries you can create a bias for that. In some cases the legislation does not apply those kind of tools, but in case you have a very good argument to promote it in this country, that can happen, and the legislation can be willing to change. It happened in Argentina, for example. Argentina did not have the in silico into the legislation, but the years before, like 2-3 years ago, they were accepting the in silico testing in order to avoid some toxicology data to be submitted in the dossier, even if that's not in the legislation. So now we're seeing that legislation comes including that in the legislation. So we can do that and help the government to see in different point of view. And the industry and the consultants companies, laboratories, everybody in the value chain have the knowledge to do that. So everybody together can promote the legislation changes, right? So, and the last thing I believe is choose the better product to move forward for your company, because now we have a very vast options of biological products. At least back here in Brazil we have a lot, and that is spending for Latin American countries. But I believe you choose the right chemical together with the right biological, in the case that you can combine both, in the cases that you can use better products with low toxicity, using different mixtures or different formulations, so I believe that's the new way to get in Latin American countries, not only, but also in other countries all over the world. So I believe choosing the right product, the right path, the right strategy before starting to spend time and money, I think is a good advice.
Mm-hmm. Sounds good to me too. Yeah. Thank you, Alexander. All right, Garth.
Yeah, just very quickly, because a lot of the things are in line, and I won't repeat them with what has just been said. Basically, for Africa, taking a generality for the whole of that huge continent, is start early, as has already been mentioned. Also in product choice, I think you're looking both at the smallholder sort of domestic sort of production and plantations, the larger plantations that are producing for export markets. You'd be talking to the local distribution cooperatives about the products in locally for each country, about in terms of deciding what products you would take forwards. I agree with the idea of taking the best products, that is the best in terms of efficacy and improved safety, if that is possible. And so that would be the first thing. There'll be a comprehensive review of what will fit into each of these, each of the key markets to start with, that will open up the different regions of Africa. So we look at the existing data. Typically a product won't come orphan to us, so we'll already have a package working with the applicant. And then we would look at a preliminary risk assessment for Africa. So we'd look at knapsack usage, for example, that we may not use in other regions, and check that that product also has, there's responsible use, because you need to be aware of different conditions.
Okay, sorry.
We're freezing up.
Sorry. Yeah, you were freezing up a little bit, but
okay. So hopefully you didn't miss, but I think
it.
the key points are product choice clearly leads local contact, data gap analysis of the core, creating a core package from the original data set or core package, which most consultants I think can do, running a preliminary risk assessment to check that the product is appropriate for the market it's going into, and then finally local trials, local contact with the ministries, usually the ministries for official trials, that links the contact. The ministries usually have to be on side with the product, that it's efficacious and it's safe to use, and they will then work with you to get that product to market.
Great. Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. All right, Lauren is going to take questions from the audience right now. It looks like we've got one. So Lauren, why don't you take that away?
Yeah, we do have an audience member looking for an update about biopesticide regulations. If we have a panelist who'd like to take that.
Since I've got an open mic, maybe I'll just kick off. I think with biologicals, it's actually know your product. So if you have a good knowledge of your product in different agronomic environments, different application methodologies, and also with advisor support, where there is advisor support. In many cases for biologicals, they need careful application to fully optimize their efficacy. So it's very important for that understanding to be had in the first place. But a lot of, just to finish on that very quickly, is that we do a lot in Europe on literature. So a lot can be done without needing to generate new data. A lot can be done with a comprehensive literature survey and read across. That requires expertise in the different areas. And then the efficacy side is absolutely key to delivery of the approval.
Thanks, Garth. George,
Okay.
did you have anything?
Yeah, just to add on that, I think in my years of experience with microbials and biopesticides, in the US, the regulatory process usually isn't the biggest hurdle that a company's going to have to get to market. It's going to be kind of operationally fermentation, getting it stable in the bottle, getting it stable on the shelf for a long enough time that fits into a market that's traditionally dominated by chemicals that are stable for years, right? So it's these kind of operational things that should be focused on as far as getting to market. But the regulatory part, a lot of times biologicals have a better profile for human health, a better profile for environmental safety, and this is all assuming you can use the literature to find evidence that it's local. Now, it gets a little bit more tricky when you get into novel strains or strains that aren't in the local environment. That's, I would say, very difficult to overcome in a lot of instances. But those are just a few key little tips.
Wonderful. Tom or Alexander, did you have any feedback for this question?
Yes,
I do.
I do
Please,
too.
Go ahead, Pukclai. Yeah, please go ahead.
Well, as I mentioned, it's quite different in different Southeast Asia countries. So if I have some, like list of the country, I can provide more information. But quick information is the biopesticides still use the regulation originally designed for conventional pesticide, but recently they have specific guidelines for registration of biopesticides like microbials or plant extracts in different Southeast Asia countries. Some countries like Philippines, they have the guideline available in English. So if you want to register, they have the clear guidelines. The country like Malaysia or Thailand, they have like bilingual. You also can check with that on the requirements. But Indonesia and Vietnam, they have in the local language. And talking about registration of biopesticides is quite important to understand the product category. Are we talking about microbial, or are we talking about plant extracts or something else? Because in those key Southeast Asia countries, mainly they have the guidelines only for microbials and plant extracts. If we are talking about allelopathic substance, or if we're talking about those beneficial insects, they might not have clear regulations yet, and then you need to discuss with authorities because there are so many restrictions as well. Registration of those products in different Southeast Asia countries, still you need to have the good local partner to explain to you what you need to conduct and what you don't have to conduct. Like in Vietnam, if you want to register biopesticide, you have less requirements regarding the field trials. So you don't have to conduct like big scale and small scale in the both of North and South, but only some specific requirements that you have to meet. It will be very detailed, but I would love to answer with more information if I know the target country. Yeah.
Alex.
Yeah, I would say almost the same, because like some clients comes to us and say, what I need to register product, like a biological product in Brazil or in other Latin America countries. And I say to them, you know your product, I need to know the profile of your product, because it's not like a cake recipe. You know, you need to know your product, as Mr. Garth just said. You need to understand the product, if it is a microbial, if that is a product taken from nature, you have like inoculant, what you have in hands, you know, so you need to understand your product before you trace the path of registration. That happens a lot of times back here in Brazil, and I believe in all over the world that biological is being registered. So the accessory to understand the product and guide in the right path of registrations is crucially important here, because otherwise you can go to market, you can get in the market, but with different appeal from what your strategy was, you know, so something that make no sense. So you need to understand your product. In some cases, you have a strong path guides you to a requirement or something refusement that you cannot, you need to start the path of registration again. So it's important to point out that. So answering the audience question, I will be reading to answer deeply the question if I have more information, in order to guide you to a specific country that you want to register, if that is in Latin America countries or in my panelists, speakers here, to attend your demand.
Wonderful. Thank you guys so much for tackling that question. I do have another question that is focused on Malaysia, so I'll direct that towards Tung. Tung, can you give us an update on the biofertilizer regulation in Malaysia?
Sure. Malaysia is only one country in Southeast Asia that they don't have the fertilizer regulation. So if you plan to import the biofertilizer to Malaysia, what you should do is to check with the plant quarantine to see if they allow you to import those biofertilizer to the country or not, because they don't have the guidelines specifically for fertilizer or biofertilizer. But what company have to do is to check if the country or the Malaysian authority have the restriction on that specific microbial strains or not. You check with the national standard of the country, they have that. Because the country they have a concern regarding bringing the alien species or let's say foreign strains of microbials to the country, they might ask you to conduct the pest risk assessment to make sure that the microbial would be safe for the country or not. And if you pass those tests, then they will allow you to import the product. Check first because sometimes they already have the list of the approved microbial strains to import to the country, but you still need to check with the plant quarantine department. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you, Tung. I do have one more question that I can direct towards the group of panelists. Are there any recommendations you would offer inert ingredient manufacturers as it relates to promoting into biopesticides?
Maybe if I kick off, because in Europe we've just revised the negative list of coformulants. So basically that's one to watch, absolutely, even for conventional products. You'd need to avoid the negative listed coformulants, whereas in the US you have a positive list. So that's one to watch. You also have to watch for labeling for the classification of those products, because of course any coformulant that has any adverse labeling will push that biological into being a non-biological product, and have to be very careful, particularly with preservatives, which are needed, but you have to very much watch things like sensitization labeling. So in other words, your biological looks very green and proper, may trigger a sensitization labeling, which would then take it out of the biological space in some markets. So a great deal of care is needed in selection of coformulants.
Wonderful. Thank you. Tung, did you have any feedback for this question?
Yes, I always have. So what companies should do is for Southeast Asia is to check if those coformulants list in any of the restrict or prohibit list of substance or not. Many companies which produce coformulants also do that nowadays, just to make sure that their product will be, list as the ban or restrict substance or not, or upcoming change. I always check that like for the countries like India, Vietnam, Philippines, Thailand, because they update the list from time to time. So it's not a bad idea to check. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Alexander or George, did you guys have any feedback on this question?
Nothing specific, nothing to add, right? Just check the lists for the local regions that you're doing. And I'm just going to bring up PFAS one more time to say these are coming, and it better to check it now than later.
Yeah, the worst to be the last is that you just say it's the same that the previous said, so it's just to check. You need to check the coformulants, check everything if it is forbidden or not, in order to include that inert or that coformulant in the product. So take care about it before you move forward. That's all.
All right. Thank you, everyone. I really appreciate you taking the time to have this discussion for us today. We've run out of time. We thank everyone for who's attending this, and I hope you all have a wonderful evening or day wherever you're located, and we'll see you next time. Thank you, everyone.